When it comes to lenses, there are certain things that we expect. It should have glass inside of it. It should mount to a camera. It should have some sort of autofocus most of the time. And while most people reviewing this lens are going to focus on the dirt cheap $89 retail price, which is understandable, I think the more interesting thing about it is that they took away everything. There are no controls anywhere on this lens. There are no buttons, even down to the fake focus ring that does not turn. It just looks the part. So my question for this video is simplicity truly the ultimate form of sophistication, or have they reduced a lens down to a soulless appliance? Is the focus ring that important? Is this the cheapest feeling lens in all of existence? This is the TT Artisan AF 50mm f1.8 Neo, and it is a full-frame autofocus lens that was released just a few weeks ago for Sony E-mount, Nikon Z, and L-mount cameras, and I'll say it here, it's cheap. Back when I was shooting Canon almost 20 years ago, the Nifty 50 was a cheap little $100 lens that everyone recommended that you buy first to replace the garbage kit lens. 50mm gives you a natural looking field of view, good enough for portraits, street photos, family photos, product shots, food even. And the f1.8 aperture was the real seller. Kit lenses are usually f5.6 out at 50mm, so you will get much more subject separation, blurrier backgrounds, all of the good things that you see in so-called professional photos could be achieved with a cheap little upgrade lens. And over the last 15 years, I've reviewed more 50mm lenses than I can count on a TI-83. I don't think I remember a single one, however, that did not have a focus ring at all. Construction here is mostly plastic. There is a metal mount, but to say this feels high-end is a lie, and to say that it is cheap feeling might be a touch harsh. It's reasonably solid for being only about 160 grams in weight. Weather sealing, not that I can see. There is a small plastic lens hood, and the rear lens cap does have a built-in USB-C port for firmware updates, but beyond that, there isn't really anything interesting here, except for that fake manual focus ring. Now, why am I making a deal out of this? Theoretically, almost no one out there is using a manual focus ring on their autofocus lenses, but these rings are useful. If your autofocus gets confused, if you are shooting through, let's say, a piece of glass, if you have something in front of your subject, if you are shooting, let's say, astrophotography, or if you are testing lenses, because you can precisely adjust the focus instead of relying solely on the autofocus. With this lens, the autofocus is a little bit slower than average, but not horrible, but it is far from the instant response that you get from modern Sony or Sigma or Tamron lenses, and slower than competitors such as Viltrox. There is a slight mechanical sound when the autofocus is moving. Take a listen. It's not loud, but it is there, which is important to note if you are planning on using your 50mm for video. Again, it's perfectly fine, dare I say brilliant for the low price, but it's not as refined as other more expensive 50mm lenses out there. I've been taking this lens everywhere over the last 3 or so weeks, and so you'll see some samples from it. All of these are done on my Sony a7 IV when I talk about optics, and this is one of those lenses that optically has a lot of compromises, but when you look at the photos themselves, they look absolutely nice. And I have to remember that there is a subset of people that simply want a good enough lens, that don't need optical perfection, that don't need sharpness that needs to be dialed back in post, and this lens certainly delivers that. For casual family photos or portraits, there is enough sharpness in the center of the frame for it to look good without being overdone. The corners, in most cases, they are blurred out so you don't notice the shortcomings. The colors are solid, the backgrounds disappear with pretty good bokeh balls. Fine details are mostly rendered pretty well. If you really want to get technical, however, this lens is a bit soft in the center until about f4, and the corners are quite soft until about f5.6 and beyond. Does that mean that you can't use this lens at f1.8? No. In fact, I shot the majority of these wide open, and I think that they are perfectly usable. If you aren't shooting landscapes or flat subjects, you likely will never notice the optical shortcomings, but as soon as you do, then you realize why this lens is in fact so cheap. Vignetting is heavy at f1.8. That means the corners of the image are very dark, wide open. As you stop down, things improve, but gradually and not immediately. There is also some interesting pincushion distortion as well, which is a bit unusual for a 50mm. But I will say for portraits, most photographers and subjects like a little bit of pincushion. Flare control isn't great, and the little lens hood is of little help in this regard. This is a budget lens, so the fancy element coatings that prevent this sort of stuff are missing. Chromatic aberration is quite noticeable on high contrast lines, as is loca or longitudinal chromatic aberration, so if you want to avoid purple and green fringing, you need to stop down to about f4 and beyond. The bokeh is pretty good overall, but it does have that same fringing on the edges as well. Will you notice this with most shots? Well, it really depends on how picky your eyes are. This lens makes the most sense for someone who wants a very small, light prime for shooting with autofocus and the subject remains in the center of the frame most of the time, and you want that smooth background that only f1.8 offers you, and you are also on an extremely low budget, and you're maybe even looking for a first beginner prime. It's a good candidate, but there are some serious optical shortcomings that you have to come to terms with. Again, it still produces great images, but not optically perfect ones. And this lens does take away some of the versatility with the lack of the manual focus ring. Some photographers out there might look at this and say it's refreshingly simple. Others will feel like this is a lens that is missing an essential piece of its design. Personally, the tactile feel of turning an aperture ring, let alone a focus ring, is something that I do miss when I use this lens, but you won't get an aperture ring unless you spend around $400 US these days, at least on full frame. Is it necessary to take great photos? No, but does it add to the experience? In my opinion, yes, it does, but let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. Is removing the manual focus ring the future of cheap autofocus lenses? Curious about that one. This lens is a tough one for me. On the one hand, it offers pretty stunning images at a very low price. Take a look at this shot and ask yourself, do you need more sharpness? Do you see the pincushion and the vignetting as real negatives? Are people out there paying 20 times the price for G Master 50mm lenses that barely make any perceptible improvement? It's a good question that I don't know the answer to. On the other hand, this lens is so full of optical compromises that you don't have to make with competitors such as Viltrox that are maybe $60 USD more, and those lenses have regular controls, better autofocus, better build. You really can't argue with the value of what you are getting here, especially on full frame. It's an incredible lens for $89, but is the Viltrox 50mm f2 Air better? Yes, in my opinion. I think that's the best 50mm lens under $200 today, but if you don't want to spend the $200, there is no Viltrox 50mm lens that you can buy brand new for $89. That's really only something that you can get with TT Artisan. Is it soulless? Well, a little bit, but not much less than that Viltrox Air lens. I think it's an interesting thing. Using this lens is less emotional. It feels almost toyish in a sense because you are walking around and you can't even spin this thing. And again, it's made out of plastic. It feels a little bit cheap, but the resulting images are pretty dynamic and perfectly adequate for most people. If you pick up a cheap full frame camera for $500-600 and you slap this lens on it, you have a pretty impressive setup for less than the price of a used Sigma 50mm art. And that's really the point. I think finding cool gear like this that's inexpensive, that still accomplishes great things on a budget is part of why photography is so interesting. The Viltrox Air is not that much more money, so I'd say if you can save up, save your money and get that one. That is still my recommendation for a budget nifty 50, but if you want to spend about half of that, this is an option that really did not exist about a month ago. One last thing that I will mention is because there are no controls on this lens, no rings, no switches whatsoever, it opens up some modding potential. There is a video on YouTube demonstrating some crazy skins, I think they are called, for this lens. So you can make it look like something completely different, and maybe that adds to the experience. That probably would become a talking point pretty quickly out in public, but let me know what you guys think down below. Is this the future What is your favorite 50mm lens under $200 US? Curious what your thoughts are. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more and have a nice day. Bye-bye.